Today on Go Island, the songs and stories of Davey the Punk, as told as performed by Bob Bossin. Today on Go, sea lions on the docks in the Cowichan Bay, party talk, football party that is, and a big donation to the Royal BC Museum. All that and more today on Go.
All horse players die broke. It's a sure thing, it's the inside dope. From Saratoga to New Orleans, it's hope eternal and cans of beans, and shoulda and woulda and coulda beans. And hey, buddy, can you spare a smoke? All horse players die broke. My father taught me that. All horse players die broke, or he'd say the track is the one place where the window cleans you. I was just a kid at the time. He died when I was young, but I'd hear these stories about him. And then one day I stopped for lunch at the United Baker's Dairy Restaurant on Spadina Avenue in the old Jewish immigrant district of Toronto. The restaurant had been there since 1922. It had a pressed tin ceiling, the grouchiest waitresses in the world, and a counterman as old as Methuselah. Well, I sat at the counter and I started to kibitz with him. I said, "How long have you been in Toronto?" He said, "Länger wie meine Zähne," longer than my teeth. I said, "Well then, did you know the Bossins?" He said, "Sure, I knew the Bossins. I knew Hi, I knew Art, I knew Sadie, Celia, I knew Davey." I said, "Well, Davey was my father." He said, "Yeah, we used to call him Davey the Punk." I said, "Davey the Punk? Why did you call him Davey the Punk?" He said, "Because he was a punk kid. He was a verbrechter." A verbrechter, an outlaw. Well, after that, I wanted to know everything I could find out about my father. And fortunately for me, the police had felt about the same way.
And we are going to tell you more about Davey the Punk through songs and stories of Davey the Punk as performed by Bob Bossin later on this edition of Go Island. In the meantime, it is time once again for the toy drive in Oceanside benefiting SOS. You're watching Go Island on Shaw TV Channel 4. I'm Kate Bergen. We're here at Headliners, and already I'm apologizing in this show. This is not Bob Bossin. This is Bob Bossin. So I apologize. Welcome, Bob. And thank you for doing your performance with us earlier. It's the very beginning of your show? That's how you started out?
Yeah, it's a slightly condensed version of the very beginning. But
okay.
And it is true. That incident, I went to this delicatessen in Toronto, and the guy said, "Your father, he was Davey the Punk."
And you didn't know anything about your father's activities?
Well, no, I
point?
did. My father was a very funny guy in that he was virtually silent. There were people who thought he was mute, and that was not shyness or anything like that, but he'd been living outside the law for a long time, and as he would say, what you don't say can't be held against you. But when he was comfortable with his cronies, these guys liked nothing better than to tell stories. And they were wonderful, funny stories, and I got to hear some of them, and other times they'd shoo me away before they'd say them.
How old were you when he died?
I was 17 when he died.
So you were starting to get a sense of what was going on in that world.
He wasn't real secretive with me. He was out of it. He had quit the gambling business when I was 4 or 5 years old, in part because he didn't want me to grow up around it. And he actually became a booking agent for nightclubs, so I grew up in show business, and here we are. So it worked.
Now, is the show a part history, part musical, part narrative, how do you describe this show? What are people going to see?
That's all true. I think of it as storytelling. I mean, my dad was a fabulous storyteller. He was mute much of the time, but when he told a story, it was great. And so I mean, that's my main mode. I mean, some of it's storytelling in song, some of it's stories that they told, and some of it's his story. And his story is historical. I mean, it's about the development of the gambling industry in Canada and about what happened with these immigrants who came over at the beginning of the 19th century, and because of prejudice and one thing and another couldn't get white collar work, so they created an industry around bookmaking and gambling.
And this is the moment where I have so many more questions that I can't answer because we have limited time. I'm going to throw things over to Terry Church. She's spending some time with a colony of sea lions who call home at the docks of the Cowichan Bay Inn and Suites. They call it home there for a couple of weeks every year. Still ahead on Go Island, are you in the mood for football? It's Grey Cup weekend. History donated to the Royal BC Museum, and Melanie Panetta tries her hand at bartending. That and more still ahead on Go. You're watching Go Island on Shaw TV Channel 4. We're here on stage at Headliners, which is the venue for the next offering from Western Edge Theatre. It is the songs and stories of Davey the Punk, performed by Bob Bossin.
Did you see Benny the Shoikatai, the old bootlegger with a butcher shop in the back alley off Kensington? He had a hell of an operation. You could lay a bet, have a drink, and buy a chicken. They were good kosher chickens. But he always kept a few in the back in case the cops came for a raid. He had one of the kids out at the street who'd whistle if the cop came into the alley, and then the booba, the old lady, would come downstairs, and they put the bottles in her apron, put a couple of chickens on top, and she'd shuffle down the alley smiling and nodding at the cop. Benny stuck his betting slips up the ass of one of the chickens. They never caught him.
I'm wondering if there will be a bleep by the time you at home see this particular part of Go Island. We're going to throw things over now to Dan Kahn because there's probably going to be a little bit of betting going on this weekend. It is Grey Cup weekend. Are you ready for some football? Dan asks you just that on the streets of Victoria. You're watching Go Island on Shaw TV Channel 4. That is Bob Bossin. He's rehearsing for a bit he's going to do later on this edition of Go Island from his upcoming performance, The Songs and Stories of Davey the Punk. It's a Western Edge Theatre presentation performed here at Headliners for only 3 performances, November the 23rd, 24th, and 25th. We're going to throw things over now down to Victoria. The Royal BC Museum recently received a very large donation from Pemberton Homes, their entire archives.
Knock, knock, who's there? Attila, Attila, who? Attila, same joke as last night. And he's laughing 'cause I'm laughing, 'cause he's laughing 'cause I'm laughing, walking with my dad in the twilight. 'Cause me and my dad, we're gonna take a walk. We're gonna hold hands all around the block. He's gonna buy a cigar, I'll get an ice cream cone. And it's me and my dad until we get home.
We're quite thrilled today to have Bob Bossin appearing here on Go Island. This is Shaw TV Channel 4. I'm Kate Bergen. That is Bob Bossin with a short bit from his upcoming performance of the stories and songs, or songs and stories, I'm sure I'm mixing it up, of Davey the Punk. Davey the Punk was Bob's father. This is a musical portrayal that is its debut in its full-length form here at Headliners on November the 23rd, 24th, and 25th. And from what I understand, the story is also being released as a book next year. We're going to throw things over now to Melanie Panetta. She's seen if she has what it takes to be a bartender. That brings us to the end of this edition of Go Island. Thank you very much to Bob Bossin. We encourage you to attend the upcoming performances. There are only 2 and 1 matinee of the songs and stories of Davey the Punk, written and performed by Bob Bossin. You can get tickets in advance, westernedge.org. Thanks for watching this edition of Go. We'll see you next time.